Episode 151, Daniel's House. Marvin didn't expect such a place from the address Bessy had given him. Stunned, he paused for a while before turning the car off and pulling out the key. The door of the manor was made of ornate black iron. Marvin and the others all got out of the car and stopped in front of the door.
"Bessy, this is your friend's house."
Marvin looked at the black door with a stunned expression. There was neither a doorbell on the door nor any signs of how to open it. It fit seamlessly into the wall, like a piece of black, refined steel. Bessy followed Michael out of the car calmly and didn't respond.
"How do you open this?"
Marvin asked and glanced at Bessy again.
"Bessy, would you like to call your friend?"
Marvin was now in awe of Bessy's friends, especially after knowing that Daniel was also her friend. He had always suspected that the few big bosses who were friends with Daniel would suddenly appear. No, Bessy shook her head. She walked past Michael and over to where Marvin was standing in front of the door. A crystal screen gradually appeared on the black, refined steel.
"What the fuck? What magical thing is this? It's so high-tech,"
Samuel said. He had been examining the door. He watched as Bessy walked to one side of the black, refined steel door. It changed color, and a three-dimensional pupil flashed on the screen. The three-dimensional pupil rotated. A cold machine voice sounded at the door. "Verification successful." The fine steel door slid apart, separating into two sides. Michael stood to the side watching Bessy. When the three-dimensional pupil verification appeared, he didn't even raise an eyebrow. It was not until Bessy passed the verification that he narrowed his eyes slightly. Their relationship was that good? She even had her pupil verified at the door? The door opened and inside was a large green area filled with various herbs. A concrete road led to the garage on the left, and a narrow cobblestone road ran through the middle. They walked in. Marvin and Samuel were acting ignorant and only walked in after staring at the door several more times.
"Robert, get off the phone."
Marvin took 2 steps forward and couldn't help but call Robert when he noticed he had not caught up with them. Robert was leaning against the car door, holding his phone and calling someone with a cigarette in his mouth. His usually warm face was especially fierce today as he said,
"He's in Devil City, but I'm not sure where. Just search through the whole city."
He reached out and touched the area on his neck that had been struck by the needle before.
"Coming."
He hung up the phone and stood up straight. He had come to Devil City with Bessy, just to get her to talk to Officer Gomez for him. Although the manor was large and the door magical, Robert was focused on Daniel and was too distracted to care about other things. He got ready to go inside, but stood in a daze for a few minutes before entering. Inside was a 3-story Gothic-style villa. Bessy calmly pressed her fingerprint at the inner door and went straight in. On the first floor was the entrance hall, and except for a few pieces of furnishings, it was almost empty. A mechanical voice sounded. "Welcome." A robot about 1.2 meters tall came out of the corner, holding a few bottles of water on a tray. "The host will come down immediately." Marvin had never seen such a robot before, but seeing how calm Bessy and Michael were, he suppressed his curiosity. He didn't want to look so ignorant. Who was this friend of Bessy's? Where did this robot come from? How was it so smart? Robert was different, however. Once he arrived in the lobby, he noticed Michael stare and snuffed his cigarette consciously before asking,
"Bessy, where is your friend?"
He was ready to see Bessy's friend and leave straight away. He had already told someone to pick him up. Bessy thought for a while before answering. He should be on the 3rd floor. Daniel was a medical maniac and practically lived in his laboratory. Robert found a trash can to throw his cigarette butt into. He looked at Michael again and said,
"Michael, I came as you asked. Can I go now?"
Michael just stared at him lazily and did not say anything. Bessy did not care if Robert left. Robert saw that they all ignored him and couldn't help but touch his nose. He then turned around and walked to the door. Bessy took a glass of water from the tray and said in a calm voice, "This is Alfred. He's a first-generation robot butler." Samuel nodded and looked at Alfred curiously, but was quickly attracted to other things in the hall. There were many strange things in the hall. On the central table, there was a large piece of rough diamond that looked like a little flower. It sparkled dazzlingly in the sunlight. Does he own such a big stone and keep it like this? Is he not afraid of thieves? Samuel couldn't help but gasp in astonishment, and he stared at the diamond for a long time. Bessy hadn't seen this diamond the previous time she came. She was also rather curious. I wonder when he placed it there. Bessy did not often ask about Daniel's personal life. Although they had a close relationship, they didn't inquire too much about each other's private affairs.
"Half a year ago in the Middle East,"
Michael said. He was not very interested in this conversation, and just leaned on a chair calmly as he answered Bessy. Before Bessy could say anything, a voice sounded from upstairs, sounding as cold as jade.
"Yes. How did you know?"
His tone was quite doubtful. Daniel's home maintained a constant temperature of 75 degrees all year round. He didn't wear a long coat and only wore a white shirt. He walked downstairs and looked at Michael doubtfully. The origin of this diamond was tricky, so only the big diamond boss knew about it. Even Chief Matthew didn't know about it. So how did Michael know? Marvin and Samuel had both subconsciously looked upstairs to see what their friend Bessy had brought them to see. Marvin had been turned around, reaching out to touch the diamond. But after seeing the man's face, his hand shook in shock and a rare expression appeared on his otherwise stony face. Daniel Brown? Bessy's friend had turned out to be Daniel Brown, and he had given her permission to enter his home? Marvin knew that Bessy knew Daniel, but he hadn't known just how close they were. She had even brought them into Daniel's house. In his mind, he immediately thought of Chief Matthew's relationship with Daniel. Marvin's expression changed, and he quickly retracted the hand that was about to touch the diamond. Robert had already opened the door to leave, but hearing the conversation, he realized that Bessy's friend had come out. After thinking about it, he decided to greet her friend before leaving. As soon as he turned around, he saw Daniel leaning on the table beside the diamond. Only his side profile was visible, but Robert still recognized him. His hands turned numb on the door handle, and he thought for a long time before asking uncertainly,
"Daniel?"
He froze in place. He hadn't expected Daniel to appear in front of him for a second time after he had failed to find him, even after traveling around the world. Daniel turned and took an apple from Alfred's small tray. He took a bite out of it and said vaguely,
"I advise you not to move randomly. My house is full of Alfreds."
He coughed.
"High-tech gadgets arranged by others. In my house, I'm invincible."
With that in mind, Daniel snapped his fingers and several infrared rays appeared immediately around Robert. Bessy was too tired to bother with Daniel. This fool. Robert had yet to recover from the shock and was immediately speechless. Daniel swallowed and addressed Marvin and Samuel first.
"You can continue to stroll around on the first floor. There are many computers there. If you need anything, you can ask Alfred."
He then turned to Michael and Bessy.
"Bessy,"
he coughed again.
"Friend, the two of you can follow me upstairs."
Michael nodded faintly, then turned towards the stairs and took 2 steps forward.
"Let's go. I want to see your research." "There are still a few steps missing. You came just in time. I was about to ask Bessy to find you."
Daniel nibbled on the apple. Bessy raised an eyebrow after hearing Daniel address Michael as friend. Although she was a little surprised, things were still going as she expected. After all, Daniel had compromised only after hearing about Michael. The 3 of them went upstairs together. However, the 3 people downstairs were still stunned. Especially Robert. His head was spinning wildly. Bessy's friend was Daniel, and Daniel had even given her the password to his home. Daniel had referred to Michael as friend. He felt like the whole world had gone wrong. What fantasy world was this? The phone in his pocket rang. Robert stiffly pressed the answer button. A hearty voice on the other end said,
"Robert, you were just telling us to come just now. Why are you not out yet? We're outside the black door. Come out quickly."
Robert was speechless. Why would he go out? He was completely stunned. The 3 of them went to the laboratory. The laboratory occupied most of the 3rd floor. Daniel pushed the door open to let them in. The computers and machines were turned on, and there was a bunch of experimental precision instruments.
"I have done some research on a virus."
Daniel took out a test tube and handed it to Michael.
"Take a look."
Michael did not specialize in virology as Daniel did, but his brain was like a database. Daniel had known that ever since the World Health Organization incident. Thus, when Bessy told him that the report was from Michael, Daniel took it to study immediately. Michael glanced down. Bessy didn't understand what they were looking at and just wandered around the laboratory for a while. Daniel saw that Michael was still looking at the test tube and walked over to her.
Remember what I told you last night about your grandma? Was there a nuclear power plant or something similar near your house?
Bessy leaned on the table and narrowed her eyes. Daniel finished his apple and threw the core into the trash can.
Your grandma was exposed to uranium radiation. This kind of radiation can make the cells change.
He spoke briefly and frowned after thinking about it. People who were in constant contact with uranium were not ordinary people. After hearing this, Bessy was silent. She pursed her lips and nodded in understanding after a long time. I understand. Bessy did not want to speak more about this, so Daniel did not ask further. He went to see the results of the other experiments. Episode 152. A message from BM 3 years ago. Michael had finished studying the test tube. Daniel had developed a catalytic virus that repaired organ cells and caused regeneration, but not much progress had been made. Every cell could regenerate, but it also had a lifespan and would stop regenerating at a certain point. He put the test tube aside and pulled out a chair to sit in front of the computer. The screen of the computer was black, and the three-dimensional virus structure rotated on it. Daniel looked at Michael and came over to ask him,
What do you think? Wait.
Michael narrowed his eyes slightly. Downstairs, the other 3 people took a while to react. Samuel coughed.
Are you not leaving?
Samuel tilted his head and glanced towards Robert. Robert finally caught his breath. His usually warm face looked freakish, as if he had just seen a ghost, and he said grumpily,
Why would I leave?
He had looked for Daniel for several years. Forget about Bessy. What about Michael? Robert glanced upstairs quietly. Although he wanted to go up, Michael and Bessy were there, so he didn't dare. Daniel had no furniture on the first floor and only had entertainment. Samuel, Marvin, and Robert felt as if they had entered some palatial estate. They followed after Alfred as he took them on a tour around the house. Finally, they stopped in a corner in front of some computers. They were all black. They waited downstairs for a long time before Michael came down slowly. Bessy and Daniel were still on the 3rd floor.
The 2nd floor has rooms. Pick one for yourself, except for the last 3 rooms.
Michael took a bottle of water from Alfred's tray and glanced at the 3 of them.
You can go back to the hotel if you don't want to stay. Stay? Of course I will stay.
Samuel touched his ear studs and laughed as he glanced around Daniel's house. Robert sat in a chair, thinking about life. Then he stared at Michael and stood up immediately, his hand on the table.
Michael, you already knew Daniel?
Michael was about to go upstairs. He nodded when he heard this and glanced at Robert with a very good temper.
That's how it appears, right?
Robert said.
Why didn't you tell me?
Michael had just watched as he chased after Daniel all over the world. Michael raised an eyebrow.
You never asked. If there's nothing else, I'm going upstairs.
He walked upstairs lazily. Daniel stayed in the laboratory for a whole day without coming out. He didn't have a kitchen here, so as Marvin looked through the refrigerator, he only found beer. So he called the hotel at noon to order a meal. Bessy and Michael came downstairs to eat, but Daniel remained upstairs. Michael asked Marvin to take Daniel his meal. Marvin trembled with fear and trepidation in front of the door for a long time before he dared to reach out and knock on it. Downstairs, Robert wished he was delivering the food to Marvin's place. His chest itched terribly, as if a kitten was clawing on it, but Michael and Bessy were beside him, so he didn't dare move. After a long time, he finally turned and said to Bessy,
Bessy, you also knew Daniel?
He thought for a while before asking,
Daniel went to Chicago last time to find you?
Bessy reached for French fries and only nodded. Samuel propped his legs up and sat on the other side, watching Robert in amusement with a raised eyebrow.
Daniel almost went to Bessy's apprenticeship banquet last time. Of course, if you had asked her, she might have brought you to see Daniel earlier.
Robert was speechless. His regret felt stronger than ever now. He wished he could go back a week ago to Bessy's apprenticeship banquet. Even if 1,000 people tried to stop him, he would still have gone. After eating, Bessy and Michael did not go upstairs to disturb Daniel. Only Alfred went upstairs to retrieve Daniel's bowl. Samuel had studied Daniel's house all afternoon and was rather bored now, so he leaned over to speak to Bessy. He lowered his head to scroll through Twitter, and Sherry asked him if he wanted to play a game. The battle between Henry and Toby yesterday had stayed on Twitter's hot searches for a long time. Many young people watched the passionate game and then turned on their computers to play it themselves. Samuel turned and asked Marvin,
Marvin, do you want to play a game?
Marvin's eyes lit up, but he paused and shook his head.
No, I asked someone to help me reach this level. I need to reach the supreme level.
Samuel glanced at Bessy.
Would you like to play with Marvin's account?
Bessy was thinking of Bertha's affairs, but when she heard Samuel, she looked up and threw her phone aside, nodding. Marvin's account level was not as high as Michael's, but Bessy didn't mind. Samuel remembered what he had told Michael before and asked,
Michael, Bessy is playing with Marvin's account. Do you want to join us?
Michael was leaning on the sofa, his eyes half closed as if he was sleeping. After a long while, he replied,
Okay.
Daniel had enough computers in his house for them to all play at once. They all loaded the game. Cheryl saw that there were 4 users and turned on her microphone.
Samuel, are the other 2 people your friends? Are they turning on their microphones?
Samuel had also turned on his microphone. He laughed and said,
No.
Marvin moved to the bench next to Samuel and watched as they started the first game. Bessy randomly took 3 cards, and Michael did the same. However, Samuel and Sherry played well together, and they easily won the game. But Samuel called out,
Michael,
in the middle of the game, and Sherry's hand on the computer's controls paused. The second game started. This time, Sherry played more seriously and laid out a straight flush. Samuel almost flipped the cup in his hand over.
What the fuck? A straight flush?
Samuel had intended to ask Bessy when she could ask Toby to let him use his professional account. A straight flush was pretty rare in a game, so Sherry's points exploded. After playing the second game, Bessy stopped. She went upstairs to see where Daniel was. Michael saw that she was not playing and put down the mouse. Samuel and Sherry found it meaningless to play now that the other 2 had stopped, so he reluctantly told Sherry to join him again next time. After closing the game page, he told Michael excitedly,
I didn't expect her to be so good. I've played against a high-level player now.
Michael looked up and closed the game page silently.
Michael, don't you want to open your mailbox? You have OCD, don't you?
Samuel pointed to the mailbox icon in the upper right corner of Michael's computer game page. Michael didn't pay attention to it. He had not used this account for a long time, but since Samuel said so, he casually clicked on it. Most of them were returned packages or event packages. There were a dozen messages. Michael clicked on all of them patiently. He clicked on the last message. It was a message from July 9th, 3 years ago. You have received a gift from your friend, BM. Michael had not used his account for 3 years. A pile of messages had accumulated in his mailbox. Samuel originally thought it was only a recent official message. In any case, system mail was generally kept for only 60 days. He didn't expect Michael to have a message from 3 years ago. Marvin sat beside Samuel and asked, curiously,
3 years ago? Does the mail not get automatically deleted every 60 days?
Samuel didn't find that strange and leaned on Michael's desk.
That account is the first district, from the International Service, which is a closed beta version, hence it's different from ours.
The first district version of the game was an international service that had people from various countries in it. It was said that the first district had many talented players. The big boss hid in the international service with a bunch of old masters. However, the first district was no longer open to the outside world, and accounts could not be used to get in either. Because there were not that many people there, only the data was updated. People who had accounts in the first district now showed them off in front of their friends. They could even specifically log on to an account in the first district and head over to see the big boss's score on the leaderboard. Only the arena of the poker tournament's major districts was accessible to all players. Each district had its ranking, and people from other districts often came over to the first district to worship the international ranking.
Look at what your friend sent you.
Samuel thought that this BM looked familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen it. He simply shook his head, but he still felt it was a little strange. Michael's account was almost to the next level. Did Michael's friends know that he had such a high account level and needed a lot more points to advance? Michael stared at the game page and shrugged casually before accepting the gift. Samuel looked over curiously. Your friend doesn't know your account level is already high. 3 words appeared on the stage. They gradually got bigger. Each word was surrounded by pale golden light. The 3 words were, Supreme Account Level. Samuel choked and his words were stuck in his throat. Michael stared at the screen, motionlessly. For a moment, Samuel thought that his eyes had gone blind. He murmured something to himself, closed his eyes and then opened them again. The game page remained unchanged, and the 3 words still stood arrogantly on the game page.
What the fuck is this? Michael, what level is your friend?
Samuel pointed at the words with trembling fingers. How did Michael's friend give him so many points that it brought his level to Supreme? Samuel glanced at the time of the message again. It was sent on July 9th, earlier than when Toby played in the finals, which made him famous. This was one of the reasons why he called Michael's friend a big boss. Michael narrowed his eyes and put his finger gently on the mouse. He clicked to accept the account points and then clicked into the leaderboard of the first district. First place, BM, Supreme Level, with 20 stars, 11,636 arena points, and a 100% win rate. Samuel fell silent again. In the upper right-hand corner, a new friend request popped up, but Michael directly ignored it. He didn't close the game page and just leaned back in the chair. He stayed motionless for a long time. Episode 153. A Big Show. Upstairs, Bessy was still looking at Daniel's experiment. She pulled over a stool and sat down beside his computer with her fingers holding the armrests. Bessy took the report sheet from Daniel and, after thinking about it, threw it back onto the table. Why did you say Michael was your friend? Daniel told her about the World Health Organization incident.
I was in the World Health Organization a few years ago.
This matter was no secret, as things in the medical organization were open and transparent. Daniel pressed the switch of an instrument and observed what happened inside a glass container.
At the time, he secretly did something earth-shattering. In the end, several doctors in the organization couldn't stand it anymore and gave him a diploma after half a year. Regretfully, he returned to Evanston after that.
A glass container gradually misted up. Daniel looked away and leaned casually on the table to watch Bessy. He squinted his slightly demonic eyes and continued.
We were both brought over by domestic doctors.
He coughed.
He did indeed teach us a lot of things then.
Daniel had always been a little insane, so there were not many people who could convince him to speak to them respectfully. Bessy narrowed her eyes. She could imagine the scenario.
The reports on the experiment will come out in 2 days,
Daniel said succinctly.
Once I show it to my tutor in the medical organization, I'll go over to Chicago directly to see your grandma.
Daniel and Michael had joined forces to discover this new type of virus. Once this research report was issued, it would surely generate a lot of news. However, Daniel, Bessy, and the others did not realize this and did not care much. Episode 150. Daniel. Bessy pursed her lips and put Bertha's ID into the search bar. This was the first time she had searched for Bertha's information on the internet. Jared. Episode 148. The Game. Episode 153. A Big Show. Upstairs, Bessy was still looking at Daniel's experiment. She pulled over a stool and sat down beside his computer with her fingers holding the armrests. Bessy took the report sheet from Daniel and, after thinking about it, threw it back onto the table. Why did you say Michael was your friend? Daniel told her about the World Health Organization incident.
I was in the World Health Organization a few years ago.
This matter was no secret, as things in the medical organization were open and transparent. Daniel pressed the switch of an instrument and observed what happened inside a glass container.
At the time, he secretly did something earth-shattering. In the end, several doctors in the organization couldn't stand it anymore and gave him a diploma after half a year. Regretfully, he returned to Evanston after that.
A glass container gradually misted up. Daniel looked away and leaned casually on the table to watch Bessy. He squinted his slightly demonic eyes and continued.
We were both brought over by domestic doctors.
He coughed.
He did indeed teach us a lot of things then.
Daniel had always been a little insane, so there were not many people who could convince him to speak to them respectfully. Bessy narrowed her eyes. She could imagine the scenario.
The reports on the experiment will come out in 2 days,
Daniel said succinctly.
Once I show it to my tutor in the medical organization, I'll go over to Chicago directly to see your grandma.
Daniel and Michael had joined forces to discover this new type of virus. Once this research report was issued, it would surely generate a lot of news. However, Daniel, Bessy, and the others did not realize this and did not care much either. Bessy was relieved to hear Daniel say that the experiment had reached the last step and that the results would soon be out. She heaved a sigh of relief. Someone was knocking on the door. Bang, bang, bang. The 3 knocks on the door sounded irritated. Bessy raised an eyebrow, laughed, and stood up. Someone is looking for you. I'll go downstairs first. Daniel turned back to his cell experiment and murmured in response.
Okay.
Not long after, Robert came in with a dark face, his usually warm and beautiful presence stained with a dark aura.
Daniel.
What's the matter? Daniel turned sideways casually, withdrawing his gaze from the instrument and raising an eyebrow lazily.
Don't act lightly. Bessy already told you that Michael is on my side.
He played with a silver syringe in his hand arrogantly. Robert glanced at him, both angry and amused. He couldn't help touching his neck before dragging a chair over to sit down.
Do not antagonize me. Bessy and Michael are both here, so what could I possibly do to you? Oh.
Daniel continued playing with the silvery syringe in his hand. After glancing at Robert and determining that he did not seem intent on catching him, Daniel put down the silver syringe regretfully. Bessy had sent Daniel a copy of Robert's information in September. Some people appeared to study in the medical department in college, but secretly participated in the training of special forces. Daniel knew Robert would not be his true opponent if he didn't make a vicious move. Of course, if Robert had taken precautions against him, he might not even have had the chance to strike with his silver syringe.
Why did you not go to Evanston?
Robert glanced around at Daniel's laboratory for the first time. Daniel had so much impressive stuff here. Daniel reached out for a piece of paper without answering the question directly.
Why do you keep chasing after me?
Robert said grumpily.
You did come to Evanston when Joshua invited you, so he instructed me to catch you. If you had agreed, would so many other things have happened?
He had suffered so many heart attacks recently. When Bessy came downstairs, Samuel was asking Michael if he could play using his account. She sat on the sofa, took out her mobile phone to read the message Toby had sent her, then asked slowly, "What happened?" Samuel seemed to return to his senses.
Bessy, Michael's friend just sent him enough points to reach supreme level.
Samuel begged for a long time, but Michael still kept quiet. He walked over to the sofa and picked up a glass of ice water in Alfred's tray before pouring himself a glass.
His friend must be a great master from Team OST.
Samuel sat down next to Bessy and lowered his voice to explain.
That friend played with Michael last time, and they were a duo. Their relationship was particularly good. But the other party seemed to have disappeared. He suddenly appeared again today.
The terrifying duo from the first district. Oh, Bessy held her phone and replied in a calm voice. Samuel stared at her. Even if she was curious about Michael's friend, why was she so calm after hearing that Michael now has a supreme account level? That night, Daniel was late for dinner. He was too annoyed by Robert. Robert knew it was impossible to kidnap Daniel with Bessy and Michael here, so he used his natural talent and followed him around like a dog.
Sir, don't move.
He took out a piece of tissue to wipe the chair before gesturing with his hand.
Sit, sit.
Daniel was speechless. He was a dog.
Michael, what kind of radiation poisoning does Bessy's grandma have?
Everyone, except for Bessy, had studied medicine before, and Samuel also knew a little about the situation. Michael said lightly,
Uranium.
Samuel nodded. Robert picked up a piece of vegetable with his fork and glanced at Bessy in surprise.
Uranium radiation?
He had never seen Bessy's grandma before and did not understand Bertha's illness, but he knew of uranium radiation. Uranium only came from nuclear radiation. Was she a physicist to be able to study nuclear energy? A scientist?
I'm not sure.
Samuel, Marvin, and Daniel did not understand this either. Robert glanced at Bessy. He had heard from Marvin and Samuel that Bertha was just an ordinary person in Fairfield. Fairfield. Robert thought of something, and his expression suddenly changed, but he swallowed his words and did not speak further. The others did not notice, but Michael, who was sitting on the edge, did. He narrowed his eyes as he stared at Robert.
Michael, see if your friend goes online at night. If he does, ask him to play with us.
Samuel was focused on Michael's new account level. Michael gave Bessy a piece of ribs and said absent-mindedly,
I'm not playing. I have to be at the lab at night.
But Michael also paused a little at the mention of BM. He had never seen the other party before and had never heard their voice either. The two were matched by chance in the arena. Michael always played as he pleased, so when they played for the first time, they were on opposite sides. But his teammates did not help him, so he just played casually. In the end, his teammates couldn't keep up with his rhythm, and in the end they lost badly to BM. That was the first time he lost. He was very arrogant and unconvinced, so he pulled BM to the arena for a game. The two of them had a 5-5 win rate. They played for a whole night and added each other as friends. They often played as a duo. Although they never turned on their microphones, they seemed to have a tacit understanding of each other. Later, BM had asked if he wanted to join Team OST. Michael had thought about it and agreed. He then gave BM his contact number. But the next day, BM not only did not add him, but he did not go online in the game either. In the end, Michael thought it was boring and never went back to the game. If it had been a few months earlier and he knew that BM was back, he would have tracked them down. But now, it didn't matter anymore. After eating, Daniel went upstairs. Robert followed him immediately. Daniel gritted his teeth.
Do you want to take a bath with me?
Robert originally wanted to say he could pour water on him in the bath, but he glanced at the silver syringe and took a step back very gentlemanly. Michael was walking around the second floor towards the third floor when he stopped when he saw Robert. He glanced at Robert and Robert froze. They went to talk on the third floor at the end of the corridor. Michael held a cigarette in his hand and glanced lightly out the window.
What do you know about her grandma? Just a little.
Robert leaned against the window and took out a cigarette.
3 years ago there was an explosion in Fairfield. You know that too, right? Poison Wolf's stronghold?
Michael had gone to Chicago partly because of this.
No.
Robert lit up his cigarette with the lighter and watched as the thin smoke rose.
I also accidentally saw a report in the Research Institute. There's been a science base in Fairfield for many years.
Michael had never been concerned about this. He was used to being in Evanston, and it was not that nobody approached him from the Research Institute. It was that he always ignored them.
3 years ago there was a problem with an experiment at the science base, and it exploded for no reason.
Robert said and shook his head.
Michael, you also discovered some things when you went to Fairfield, right? Many people suffered because of that. All the data from the Research Institute is encrypted, so I don't know about the researchers. Bessy's grandma might have been affected by the explosion and the raw materials that leaked.
Back downstairs, Samuel had finished eating. The more he kept thinking about BM, the more familiar the name sounded. Sherry asked him to play with her, but he politely declined. After thinking about it, he went on Toby's Twitter. Other than a few forwarded messages from the official website, Toby's Twitter had very few other posts. He quickly found the post by Toby he was looking for. OST Toby Yearling had posted, "You're better than me. I hope to be on the same stage as you once. I'll wait for you at BM." Samuel clicked directly onto BM's account. There was only one post. The account followed one person and had 420,000 followers. If it were not for Michael's friend BM, Samuel would have forgotten about this at BM, who never posted on Twitter. BM's gift had impacted him too much. Samuel felt like even Toby might not be able to send someone enough points to reach the supreme level all at once. The only difference between BM and at BM was the uppercase and lowercase, and both of them were related to OST. Samuel was 80% sure that they were the same person. He clicked onto the list of people at BM was following and opened the profile of the only person she followed. This Twitter account also had more than 20,000 followers. This Twitter posted most often about her deskmate and then her pet Mimi, and the latest post said, "My super cool deskmate took leave yesterday and went to Devil City. My old class is full of energy now. My pet Mimi ate the grass and was punished by my dad by staring at the wall for a long time. It's so pitiful." Samuel felt like the first sentence sounded very familiar. Episode 154. You're still on the starting member list. Marvin poured a glass of water for Bessy and came forward to look at Samuel's phone.
Can a pet be punished for eating grass? Isn't this family too strict?
Marvin asked. Samuel nodded and said vaguely,
Yeah, pretty strict.
He continued scrolling down and felt like the posts on the Twitter page were very familiar. Lefty injured her hand. Samuel put down his phone and leaned back on the sofa with a dazed expression.
Samuel, are you all right?
Marvin asked when he saw Samuel in a daze.
Samuel
replied while shaking his head. He felt like something was wrong.
Samuel, where are you going?
Marvin was waiting for Samuel to invite him to a game and couldn't help asking when he saw him going upstairs.
I'm finding Michael.
Samuel had already reached the stairs. Bessy was looking through her friends on Twitter while holding the glass of water given to her by Marvin. She ignored Samuel's gaze. Noah Hyber had just posted on his Twitter, and the address displayed happened to be a street in Devil City. Bessy narrowed her eyes. Noah Hyber was in Devil City as well? Samuel reached the 3rd floor. Daniel wasn't there. Samuel saw Michael holding a test tube in one hand and a petri dish in the other. He placed them on an instrument carefully for testing.
Michael.
Samuel walked over to Michael with his phone.
What's the matter?
Michael put down the petri dish in his hands. He was deep in thought and turned back to open an account on the experimental computer. He logged on to Daniel's account and glanced at it, clicking on an old man avatar and sending a video chat request.
About your friend BM, No.
Samuel was interrupted by Michael lightly, even before he could finish speaking. At the same time, the video call was picked up. An old man in a white coat appeared on the screen.
How rare of you to send a video call to me. You bad student. Why have you done this?
The old man in the video stood in front of a pile of preserved organs and raised his head in mid-sentence. He wore a pair of reading glasses on the bridge of his nose and held a thin scalpel in his hand. As soon as he looked up, he saw the video screen. It was a man who was leaning lazily on the lab table, wearing a black silk shirt and looking at him expressionlessly. The old man's expression changed, and his spirit seemed shaken.
My beloved student, why is it you? Are you with Daniel?
He immediately changed his tone. Michael greeted him politely.
Hello, teacher. There's research that Daniel and I have overseen the procedure together.
Michael pointed his finger at the table and lowered his head to send him a document.
Take a look. He invited you to do research?
The old man was surprised, but he clicked his mouse to receive the documents and sat on a chair to begin reading them. Samuel saw that Michael was completely ignoring him, so he couldn't help but touch his nose and retreat quietly. 10 minutes later, the old man finally finished reading the document. He raised his head and looked at Michael in shock before murmuring,
You two kids, you are going to make a big fuss this time.
The World Health Organization had been studying the research of cell carcinogenesis and regeneration in recent years.
I have the research results with me. Look at it first.
The old man raised his head and sent the document on his computer desktop to Michael. He then stood up and continued,
I will give this thing to the other doctors.
He printed the documents and left. Michael could only hear the soft sound of the door closing. At the same time, Henry and Toby were at OST's villa. Their headquarters was in Evanston, but the World Poker Tour was not short on money, so every time they came to Devil City, they would directly rent a villa as their base camp. Henry took a bottle of water and walked over to Toby while asking the coach beside him.
Coach, Randall, did you not come to training?
Playing professional games requires one to be nocturnal, so Toby trained his hand muscle reaction every night. Toby opened the game and entered the simulation arena before performing skills with the cards. They rarely logged onto their professional accounts during training games. After all, they had added a lot of friends to their professional accounts. These friends would be able to watch their games, but professional teams each had their routines and strategies, so they rarely disclosed their training. Entering the simulation training camp would make sure no video records were left behind. The coach frowned and glanced at Henry and Toby.
What do you think about changing Randall out for tomorrow night's game? His mind is not in the game right now. He was the leader of a small team last time, after all.
Henry's blonde hair reflected under the light of the lamp as he smiled disdainfully.
He came to our team and ranked behind me in Sun God. He even received less attention than the Sun God, so obviously he would not be convinced.
Toby formed a team and showcased his skills in the simulation area. He nodded when he heard this.
Change them.
Randall's hand speed was high among the youth team, but neither the coach nor the others wanted to take the risk. Now that Toby had agreed, the coach went to the bench to find a new player.
Wyatt Grayson.
The coach brought the new team member to the office and carried a cup of tea inside. He stood by the window of the office and explained the situation to the new member. Wyatt agreed, surprised. After staying in the office in a daze for a while, he finally turned and left. As he turned around, he saw a photo on the coach's desk. The photo did not look particularly new. There was a group of 5 people in it. Wyatt could see Henry and Toby in the picture, both of them looking youthful. But what made Wyatt curious was that Toby was not standing in the middle of the 5 people. Instead, it was a person in black clothes. Because her cap was buckled and the brim was low, the person's face could not be seen clearly, and only a delicate chin could be seen. It looked like a girl. Wyatt gasped in surprise. He didn't know who this girl was to be able to accompany Sun God's center position. He looked away and left while thinking about this. After taking a few steps, he saw Randall at the staircase, his expression dark.
Coach told you to play?
Randall asked. Randall held a cigarette in his hand, and its smell was strong on him. He looked mockingly at Wyatt as he spoke. Wyatt took a step back and felt a little afraid.
I think so. Randall, I will go down and train with Sun God first.
He looked at Randall before immediately going down the stairs. Randall stood at the stairs and stared down at Toby, who was sitting in front of the computer in the room below. His gaze was sinister. The next day, on the 3rd floor of Daniel's residence, he got up from lying down on the computer desk groggily. Once he started an experiment, it would go all day. If Bessy had not called him yesterday, he would have skipped dinner. As soon as he got up from the chair, the blanket on his body slipped to the ground. Daniel frowned and picked up the colorful blanket. He looked at it, realized it was probably a blanket from the guest room, and tossed it aside casually. Yawning, he walked towards his machine to see the results of the experiment.
Alfred, give me a glass of water.
The computer on the table was always turned on, and a video popped up. Daniel reached out and took the glass of water from Alfred's tray. He reached for his mouse and clicked the video.
Teacher? Bad student.
The old man seemed to have slept the whole night. He looked tired but was full of spirit as he asked,
How did you get Michael to help you with the experiment?
This matter was a myth in the medical organization.
Of course, he did it because of my project.
Daniel took a sip of water and glanced at the screen.
But teacher, how did you know he was at my house? He called me on video chat last night. The others are discussing it passionately now. Do you have time to come over?
The old man patted the report on the table.
I'll come in a few days.
Daniel placed the glass back onto the table before reminding him, very sweetly.
Are you sure you want him to come back?
The old man paused.
I think it might be better not to ask him.
If Michael came back, he was afraid he would be killed. The World Health Organization would turn upside down and fall into turmoil.
By the way, has your diamond dealer friend contacted you yet?
The old man remembered one more thing.
The laboratory wants to bring in a large amount of new equipment.
Although the members of the World Health Organization were a galaxy of talents, they were all still medical people. The funds and manpower spent on researching an outcome could hardly be measured in money. They had managed to continue experimenting thanks to the big spender who had been sponsoring them for the past few years.
I don't know. I rarely contact him now. He usually contacts me first. I'll ask him for you once he finds me.
Daniel nodded casually. 3 knocks sounded outside, light and slow. Then Robert poked his head in, smiling warmly.
Daniel, Bessy asked you to come down to eat.
He found that Bessy's name was more effective on Daniel. Daniel hung up the video with the old man and threw the blanket onto his face.
Got it.
Downstairs, they were eating. Samuel was saying he wanted to watch OST's game that night.
The game against Germany's team, WAT. One is our country's best team, the other is Germany's best team. The official wants to let these 2 kings fight it out, but Sun God will win.
Poker tournament was international, and every game was officially broadcast live for over 100 million people. The game had helped several live broadcast platforms become popular. Some internet-addicted teenagers had already occupied libraries to watch the game since early in the morning. After all, both teams were very powerful. Everyone thought they would see them play in the U.S. finals, but who knew that they would be able to see it in Devil City? Bessy ate a bun and listened casually.
You only have 4 tickets, right? Let Marvin go this time. I won't go.
Robert said. He had gone last time mainly to talk to Bessy about Officer Gomez, but now that he had already found Daniel, it was meaningless to go. Robert sat there and glanced at Michael. He thought for a while before saying,
Michael, do you know who designed these defenses at Daniel's house? It's so amazing. It's a fully automated system. I also want to get one for myself.
Especially the robot called Alfred. Robert felt like someone must have known how lazy Daniel was and so designed it for him.
I don't know.
Michael squinted his eyes in reply.
You can go ask him.
Bessy sat there with her head lowered. She continued eating silently and did not dare to look up. Her phone rang. Bessy ate a chip and picked it up. It was a Twitter message from Toby.
Can you come earlier for today's game?
He did not say the reason, so Bessy frowned slightly. This game was the semi-quarters. 1 match per game was set. At 7 in the evening, Bessy and the others arrived at the gym center.
Bessy, we came so early. Look, those spectators are still waiting in line.
Samuel pointed to the line.
It only opens at 7:40 p.m.
Bessy didn't reply and just led them along another road where Henry was already waiting for them. He wore a peaked cap and did not wear the team jacket. He wore a bloated cotton jacket instead, so none of the fans recognized him.
God Miller, over here,
he called again when he saw Bessy. What's the matter? Bessy glanced at him. Henry wagged his eyebrows.
Follow me.
He took them from the back door to the team lounge. As soon as Samuel entered, he saw Toby sitting in the esports chair, and beside him were 2 doctors examining him.
What happened to Sun God?
Samuel's expression changed immediately. Michael came in behind Bessy, looked at Toby and said lightly,
Someone must have drugged him, and his muscles have turned stiff. This kind of drug is not available on the market, and he can only be cured in the hospital. He will probably experience some symptoms later on. I advise you to send him over to Daniel for a checkup since he has many useful things there.
Toby and the coach's expressions all changed, and they turned over to look at Bessy. If this was the case, then what about today's match? The 2 doctors also glanced at Michael. He looked too young, like a noble son, so the 2 of them gasped in disbelief.
How did you know?
Michael leaned lazily against the wall next to him, raising an eyebrow at them and arrogantly ignoring their question. Bessy's heart sank when she heard this. She frowned and turned to Toby. You heard him. You have to go for a checkup. Bessy took her phone out and scrolled down to find Daniel's phone number. Toby's trust in Bessy was indescribable. Since she had agreed with Michael's suggestion, his heart fell a little. It was a long time before he finally looked up.
God Miller, OST cannot lose. Can you play this match in my place?
After a pause, he said again,
When you left the team, Chairman,
he coughed.
Coach did not remove your name. Your name is still on the team's starting member list.
Episode 155. Bessy Takes Action. Toby's voice gradually became softer. Samuel originally wanted to ask about Toby, but after hearing this, his voice was stuck in the back of his throat. He opened his mouth and felt like he had hallucinated.
Sun God, what are you talking about? How can Bessy replace you?
It was not so simple to randomly change a team member. If the starter was taken off the court, only a reserve player could replace him. Without having officially registered beforehand, non-members of the team couldn't go up at will.
Yes, she can. The coaches have never stopped handing in her name,
Henry suddenly said. The other people in the room heard this again and finally fell into silence. There were not many people in the world on that list. Apart from Bessy, there was only Henry, Toby, and Wyatt, who had just joined the team yesterday. Wyatt glanced at Bessy and suddenly remembered the photo he had seen on the coach's desk last night. Her face had not been particularly clear, but Bessy's face felt a little similar, if a little colder and more arrogant than in the picture. He immediately figured out that this was the person who had taken Sun God's center position. Samuel had never truly felt like he had been struck by lightning. Even when he knew that Bessy and Daniel knew each other, he had not been as shocked as this. His mind buzzed, and it felt like 10,000 bees were flying around in his mind at once. He stared at Bessy. What kind of joke was this world playing on him? He must be crazy. Bessy was a member of Team OST?
Huh?
Samuel muttered, turning his face blankly and looking at Marvin.
Did I hear that? I think he said.
Marvin also sobered up and looked at Samuel with difficulty.
That Bessy is a member of Team OST. Oh.
Samuel nodded. His brain had already lost the ability to process, and it felt like thunder would burst out of his head. He had long known that Toby knew Bessy, and they were pretty close. Toby had even added him as a friend on account of Bessy. But Samuel thought that they had known each other through the game since Bessy played well. He thought that Toby had taken an interest in her potential. But what did Toby and Henry just say? Was Bessy a member of OST? What kind of dream was this? Since when did OST have an additional member? What position did she have? Samuel felt like because he had laughed at Robert before and concealed stuff from him while watching the show happily from the sidelines, God must have been angry and so arranged this matter. He looked at Michael and called faintly, "Michael." Michael was calmer than the others. He ignored Samuel and only narrowed his eyes at Bessy, deep in thought. Bessy did not speak nor reply to Toby. She lowered her head and gave Daniel a call. "I have a friend here." Bessy glanced at Toby and spoke quickly. Her voice was steady and no hint of emotion could be detected. "He got drugged by someone and might experience some complications if he goes to the hospital. We need to send him over to you." Daniel held his phone and some printed documents in his hands. He nodded and replied, "Okay, but I cannot stop researching. I cannot pick him up, so you must get someone to bring him over." Robert had nothing to do in the laboratory, as Daniel did not let him touch anything. Hearing this, Robert, who had been watching the cell activity warmly, leaped up with high energy.
"Daniel, how could you handle such a small thing personally? I will go."
He reached out and took the phone in Daniel's hand.
"Bessy, are you in the gym? Okay, wait for me. I'll be there in 40 minutes.
Then he threw the phone back to Daniel, picked up the coat hanging on the wall, and walked to the door.
"I will probably be back in an hour and a half."
Daniel didn't even have time to speak before Robert bolted out. After calling Daniel, Bessy asked Michael about Toby again.
"It's too inconvenient to send him to the hospital. The person who drugged him must hate him,"
Michael said. Toby's symptoms were fairly obvious, generally because of the stimulation of drugs. The cell carrier's ability to receive calls might be affected, so there would be considerable problems if he was sent to the hospital. Michael glanced over and knew that Toby was under a high level of physical stress.
"But Daniel should be no problem."
He was a talent that specialized in cellular viruses at the World Health Organization and had absorbed experience and knowledge from countless professors, so he must be able to cure this. Otherwise, Michael might send Daniel back to the old man in the medical organization. "That's good." Bessy sighed in relief and then looked at the two doctors next to Toby. "Thank you. We would like to speak in private now." The two doctors were team doctors of OST. Hearing Bessy, they glanced over at Toby hesitantly. Toby nodded at them. The two doctors went out. "Tell me, what the hell is going on?" Bessy sat down on the stool that Michael slid over for her and asked Toby. Toby frowned.
"I don't know. I was still well in the morning, but my hands started feeling numb in the afternoon. I thought it was because I trained too much last night, but my hands became more and more numb until my whole body felt numb as well. I thought it was because something had gone wrong in my body." He wouldn't have known that he was drugged if it were not for Michael's explanation. "Do you suspect anyone?" Bessy leaned back in her chair and squinted. "Someone from WAT? Or someone within your team?" She remembered the unprofessional players who had played that night. Wyatt heard this and immediately raised his hand weakly. There is one player named Randall. The coach asked me to replace him temporarily as a starting member. Last night, the way he looked at me and the sun god was frightening."
He thought about it and shuddered. Toby did not speak. Bessy nodded and said, "We will dispose of him after the competition." There was a knock on the door. This was a separate lounge opened by the World Poker Tour for Toby to use during competitions. The space was limited. The coach came in with a sullen expression and was stunned to see the group of people in the lounge. Michael leaned against the wall beside Bessy, and even though he was quiet, his presence was strong. It was the same for Bessy. The coach turned his attention to Bessy and paused again. He had seen Bessy when Toby went to school to give her a ticket. At the time, he had guessed Bessy's identity. Seeing Bessy here at this time, he glanced at Toby again and his worried heart calmed a little. He remembered that there had always been one more name on the list when he handed it in. He had not understood it before, but now his anxious heart suddenly settled down.
"Coach, are you looking for Randall?"
Toby looked at the coach. The coach withdrew his gaze from Bessy.
No, I came to ask you about your situation. I just asked the 2 doctors, and they said you have to go to the hospital. I wanted to check with you, and then let Randall play.
Instead of answering, Toby turned towards Bessy.
God Miller, replace me. Randall. He's a ticking time bomb.
Toby did not trust him. Michael's phone rang. It was from Robert, so he picked it up immediately.
You're here? Okay, we will come out immediately.
Michael stood up after saying a few words to Robert. He was still wearing a long black trench coat today, and it was unbuttoned, making his lazy appearance look inexplicably cold. He glanced at Bessy.
Find someone to send him out. Robert's car is waiting at the exit. The license plate ends with 686.
Toby was able to stand up, so he left after putting on a mask and a cap.
Where are you going?
The coach saw Toby standing up and reached out to support him.
A friend of God Miller's is helping to inspect me.
Toby put on a mask and glanced at Wyatt.
Wyatt, help me out. Help me arrange the coach's matters.
The coach turned solemn after hearing it was Bessy's friend, but he did not say anything. He had come in after the previous coach left and did not know the former players. But as the coach, he knew of Bessy's existence and now guessed her identity. He and Wyatt took Toby out. Bessy and Michael stayed in the lounge. Michael changed his posture and leaned on the table to the left of Bessy. He lowered his head and raised an eyebrow in amusement.
God Miller, since when were you on the team?
His voice was low, and he smirked slightly. Bessy seemed deep in thought and only returned to her senses after hearing Michael's question. She paused for a moment and only coughed, not daring to look at Michael. You will know soon. Soon he would know when she had joined the team? Hearing this, Michael narrowed his eyes. The coach returned with Wyatt after sending Toby off. At 8:20, the first players had already started getting ready to play. After they finished, there was a 10-minute break in the interim, and then it was time for OST to go on stage. Everyone in the lounge, including Samuel, had yet to recover. Other than Michael, nobody dared to speak. Almost everyone was looking at Bessy. Bessy held her chin in one hand and thought about it for a long time before looking up at the coach.
Do you have my jacket?
Bessy had unilaterally announced her retirement many years ago. However, OST never terminated her contract. When the coaches transferred money every month, they would also pay part of the basic salary into a certain account. The coach froze for a moment after hearing Bessy before he returned to his senses and replied,
Yes, the World Poker Tour released new ones every year.
When they released the team jackets every year, they would get an extra set. The first game was about to start, but the coach did not know how Bessy's playing was after not training for so long. Most importantly, Bessy had never trained with the other players. This game required both personal skills and team cooperation. After a round, if some players did not keep up, and the other team was working together, all their previous efforts would be in vain. Since Toby couldn't play and had given the terrible mess to Bessy, everyone would be delightfully surprised if they won. But if they lost, the pressure on Bessy and the accusations of the net scenes would be unimaginable. The coach had been pleasantly surprised, but now his heart was heavy again. He didn't want Bessy to carry the burden and blame of this matter. Toby had called Bessy because he believed in her strength. The coach thought for a while and decided to forget about it for a moment. Compared to Bessy, he was even more reluctant to let Randall play. So he turned and asked her,
Do you have an account before? Do I need to give you another account?
Episode 156, Awakening a Beast. The OST team account was professional and had a complete card set, except for the 3 God cards. However, the professional players liked to use their accounts in the games. Henry and Toby both used the account they had used to enter the arena last time. Bessy leaned on the back of the chair and shook her head. No, I will use my account.
Then,
the coach originally wanted Bessy to use the team's account. After all, the team had several professional accounts that were well equipped.
That's fine too. I will help you get the team jacket and inform the others.
The coach said nothing more and opened the door. The lounge for the other OST members was bigger than Toby's lounge. The coach walked directly to his bag and pulled out a jacket. Toby had suddenly asked him to bring it when he came out this afternoon. At that time, the coach thought that Toby's hand was only a small matter, so he had taken it casually despite feeling strange about it. Now that he thought about it, Toby's physical condition was not good. Even at that time, Randall sat at the innermost corner with a cigarette in his hand. He looked down at his Twitter. The hottest topic was today's hegemony contention between the #1 players on the German and US teams.
It's time to watch my extremely handsome sun god again.
Do they even need to compete? The result is already obvious. It will end after the sun god comes out. There were countless similar comments. Randall scrolled through it for a long time, sneering.
Look forward to it. Sun God won't even be playing today.
He was originally a celebrity on another team and had been well known in the domestic esports industry. He had surpassed many members in Team OST, except Henry and Toby. However, he was always with the young trainees. Even after he played in the games, everyone could only see Toby's efforts. Almost nobody focused on his nearly explosive output. How could Randall, who had been held up by the small team previously, possibly bear this? Today, he just wanted to prove that he could stand at the same height as Toby. Without Toby, he could still bring Team OST to glory. His eyes were unscrupulous as he looked at the comments with a sneer. Then, he turned off his Twitter and raised his chin towards the coach. The drug he had given Toby should have fully taken effect by now. The coach always explained the cards commonly used by the WAT team to the players in Toby's lounge. Now that he had suddenly come here, Randall did not think much of it. He thought it must be because Toby had a problem, and the coach was here to find him to replace Toby. Randall thought with a sneer at how the coach had said last night that he would rather use a newcomer who had never played in a competition before than use him. Now, even if the coach begged him, he would still not agree easily. Randall kept thinking the coach would come to persuade him, but the coach just took a jacket from his bag and left without even glancing at him. Randall was calm at first, but when he saw that the coach went out with the jacket without saying a single word to him, he couldn't sit still anymore.
Coach,
Randall stood up and said with a smile,
the game is starting in a little over half an hour. Are Henry and the rest ready?
The coach paused. Toby and Bessy had not told the coach about their suspicion. The coach thought it was Toby's physical problem, so he narrowed his eyes slightly at Randall's sentence. He turned around unpredictably and said in a calm voice,
They're ready.
Randall looked stiff for a moment and could not believe it. Although it was only for a short moment, the coach still noticed this and his expression turned solemn. He glanced at Randall and turned to leave. Behind him, Randall clasped his fingers together and lowered his eyebrows, his eyes sinister. If the coach didn't find a substitute, did that mean that Toby was fine? Were the drugs that could temporarily prevent Toby from playing fake? The coach didn't bother about Randall and went out to inform the officials. They changed Toby's name to Bessy's.
Are you sure you want to replace the sun god?
The staff member was also a fan of OST and was shocked to hear this. How would they play the game without Toby? The opponent was second in the finals and was not just some ordinary team.
Coach, you have to think carefully,
he said quickly. The coach shook his head.
Just do it and don't say anything about it.
If the fans knew about Toby in advance, they might attack as a group. The coach was afraid that Bessy wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure then. After solving these things, the coach went to Toby's lounge to find Bessy and hand her the jacket.
Try it on and see if it's the right size.
The jackets were changed every year according to the members' sizes. The black jacket had the white letters OST printed on the sleeves. The coach didn't know if the jackets prepared yearly for Bessy had changed, so he was afraid it would be too big. The whole competition venue had the heater turned on, so Bessy had already taken off her jacket when she came in. She took the jacket and put it on herself casually. Michael leaned to the side to watch her put on the team jacket slowly. He could tell at first glance that it was tailored to her size. He couldn't help but reach out and knock on the table casually, his delicate eyebrows slightly raised. How was it so suitable? The coach was also stunned for a moment. He didn't expect the jacket to suit Bessy so well, even though she had not come for 3 years.
Would you like to run through practice first?
Now that it was half an hour before the game, the coach looked at the 5 people and coughed. In this team of 5 people, Wyatt had never played officially before, and Bessy had never cooperated with the other players. The coach was full of worry. Henry was using his mobile phone and said without looking up,
Coach, we're about to play. It will be too late and will affect our mentality. You should just let God Miller replace Sun God's position on the team and there will be no need to worry about anything.
Henry was also an old player, so seeing how trusting, unworried, and even eager he was, the coach momentarily relaxed. He nodded.
Okay.
10 minutes later, the two teams in the first game finished. The coach took Bessy's team to the waiting area. Bessy took a black mask from Toby's seat and put it on.
This is that. Toby's?
Michael raised his hand and inadvertently nodded towards the table with an eyebrow raised at Bessy. Bessy put on her mask and said vaguely, "Yeah, his position should be here?" Michael nodded and glanced at the mask lightly. After thinking about it, he still didn't ask if Toby had ever worn this mask before. He lowered his head and walked behind Bessy quietly. Bessy had to go to the waiting area, so he, Samuel, and Marvin went to the auditorium. Samuel put his chin down and lowered his voice to ask Michael,
"Michael, how did Bessy become Sun God's teammate? Will she have any problems playing? She's good at playing, but is she on this level? Team OST is already playing one new team member with Wyatt."
Samuel, like the coach, was worried that net scenes on the internet would influence Bessy negatively. He was different from Michael and the others. He knew that the net scenes would push the blame on Bessy if the team lost. If they lost this time, Bessy would be scolded the worst. However, Michael didn't react to him and still looked rather indifferent. He was even a little cold. Bessy had already followed the coach to the waiting area. Michael had stood in the passage and stared at Bessy for a long time before leaving. WAT was the best team in Germany and the second best team in the world. The officials would originally not arrange for the first team to compete against the second team in the quarterfinals, but WAT had manipulated the operation under the table. They wanted to crush the undefeated mythical OST in the quarterfinals. Their coach was talking to a man with a cap on his head.
"Are you sure that you saw Toby leave?" "Yes. OST's coach looked like he was in a bad mental state." "It looks like Randall took action. He's a fool, but that's a good thing."
The coach from the team WAT took a puff from his cigarette and pulled out a stack of money for the man with a smile.
"Without Toby, they're only relying on Henry, Randall, and a newcomer who has never even played officially before. Yet they still want to compete with our Otto? They won't even be able to enter the semifinals this time."
The man took the money and chuckled loudly. Otto was WAT's trump card and had a status similar to that of Toby in Germany. But he was not as popular. In the past 3 years, WAT had placed second every time they encountered OST in a game. It was not that the people from WAT had never thought of bribing people from OST to play fake matches and lose on purpose. It was just that it simply never worked. Even if they offered a high price, none of them would take the bribe. Finally, Randall had been the breakthrough point. After giving the man the money, Team WAT's coach went to their lounge and called his players to the waiting area. The two teams almost moved in tandem. They happened to bump into Bessy and Henry in the passageway. Otto also saw them. He glanced lightly at OST's teammates and frowned when he saw that Toby was not among them.
"Where is Toby?"
he asked OST's coach in basic English. The coach for OST explained it skillfully without changing his expression.
"He has a conflict and will not be here tonight."
Toby was the #1 player in the current poker tournament competition, and every professional player, including Otto, wanted to defeat him. Hence, Otto frowned now that Toby was not here. The two teams entered the stadium. Otto thought it was strange. WAT's coach frowned too. He indeed did not see Toby with OST, but unexpectedly, he did not see Randall either. He only saw a new woman. She was not the first female player in OST, so that was not strange. It only felt strange that Randall was not there. The man who just took the money whispered next to him.
"They probably saw Randall drugging him, so they did not use him."
WAT's coach nodded and thought this made sense.
"What a pity."
He looked at Team OST's members with an unpredictable smile.
"They wouldn't have lost so bad if Randall had played, but now that they have brought 2 unknown newcomers..."
To make Team OST lose and not play against Toby, they devised so many things and put in so much effort. Their design had only been targeted at Toby this time. Toby couldn't play, but they had provoked a beast who was many times more terrifying than Toby. The intermission ended, and it was time for the second game between OST and WAT. Out of concern for the game's rhythm and Bessy's mentality, the OST had not announced the temporary replacement of Toby. The fans present were all shouting, "Sun God." The audience watching the live broadcast was also waiting for Toby to appear. The host smiled and spoke into the microphone. "Now we have the team that you're most looking forward to. Team OST!" Applause sounded like thunder. OST's members appeared one by one, from Henry to the other two players and then to Wyatt. The audience waiting to see Toby began to get impatient and called out, "Sun God!" even louder. The last person came out immediately behind Wyatt. She wore a mask and a well-fitted OST jacket, but her face was hidden and only her pair of cold and proud eyes were revealed. It was an unknown female member. The people watching in the libraries, their dorms, or at home all exploded.
"I have seen Wyatt on Henry's Twitter before, but who is that person behind him?"
"Where is Sun God? Where's the Sun God? We want to see the Sun God."
"What's going on with Team OST? How can they compete without the Sun God?"
Episode 157. First District's Winner. The fact that Toby was not coming was not disclosed to anyone other than the staff members. Not even the host knew about it. He thought it would be Toby at the end of the line and was already ready to speak. After seeing the scene, he changed his speech up.
"It looks like both the Sun God and Randall are not playing this time. I believe OST wanted to give the newcomers a chance. Of course, we believe OST can still come out with the strongest appearance."
Toby's fans had already started to become restless in the auditorium. Net scenes were also agitated on Twitter. When the countless fans saw that Toby did not appear, they went to Toby's Twitter and left several messages on it. Bessy's team and Team WAT all took their seats. The coach held a notebook and walked behind Bessy with a headset. The fans at the scene were overreacting, and the coach was originally worried that Bessy's mentality would be affected. But after seeing that she was calmer than him, he froze for a while and swallowed his words of appeasement. He coughed and started arranging the next strategy for them. The outcome would be decided in one game. The coach was nervous since the 5 team members had not practiced playing together before.
"Bessy, what is your account level, and how many stars do you have?"
The coach wrote in his notebook to create a strategy to play with tonight. Bessy said casually while logging into her account. "Supreme level, 20 stars. Although the coach was surprised, he also understood. As a first-generation member, it made sense that she would have the highest level. Bessy logged into her account, and the poker tournament's official website gave a close-up of her computer page. The other people on the team had already appeared in the professional industry before, including Wyatt. Although they had never competed officially before, they had served as reserve players. Bessy was the only newcomer who had been hired by OST. She was so mysterious that the director had to give her a close-up. The narrator covered the microphone and cursed, but then he still smiled and said,
"Let us look at the mysterious female player from OST. Everyone should know that OST once had a female player, Chloe, whose hand speed was faster than Henry's. I wonder if she's another Chloe found by OST." While the narrator talked, Samuel stared at the big screen in the audience. He listened to the dissatisfaction of the fans around him, and his palms started sweating furiously. If this carried on, Bessy would lose the game. Michael sat next to him, looking at the screen without moving. However, he constantly knocked his fingers on the armrest and seemed a little impatient. "Michael,"
Samuel tried to ease his emotions.
"What do you think Bessy's account level is? How many stars does she have? Is she on the supreme level?"
Even after playing with them for so long, Bessy had never once exposed her account. Michael leaned back and did not reply. The director was still giving Bessy a close-up. He just stared at the enlarged screen. Samuel did not realize Michael was ignoring him and simply said,
"Bessy is good at playing and has a good conscious operation. If she managed to meet reliable teammates, she would have no problem achieving 9 stars at the guru level. But she said her account is not at the guru level, so she might be at the master level." While talking, the big screen showed that Bessy had successfully logged onto her account. The 2 letters of the account name were enlarged. BM.
It was only the main page, as Bessy had not stayed on the page with her personal information, so neither her level nor the battle information could be seen. Poker Tournament only allowed unique usernames. No two accounts could have the same name.
20 stars?
Samuel stuttered. He reacted after a few seconds and turned to Michael dramatically.
What the fuck? Michael, what's going on?
If it had been a few days ago, Samuel would not have felt anything about the name. But he had seen this name on Michael's account yesterday. BM, the person who had sent the points to Michael. The one who played with Michael as the sinister duo 3 years ago? Michael's hand paused, and he gripped the armrest tightly. His hand turned even paler. He looked intently at Bessy's account name, which was enlarged on the screen. His eyes were dark and heavy. As if caught by an invisible hand, his heart skipped a beat. Samuel had never seen anyone who could make Michael's expression change so quickly and for so long. Marvin also liked to watch games, but was not enthusiastic about them. However, he had also seen the account that gifted Michael the points. He had also followed Samuel to look at the leaderboard of the first district, and remembered the blinding 20 stars on the supreme level and her battle scores. He had never seen a score higher than 10,000.
It turns out that the newcomer of OST is BM.
Compared to them, the commentator was a little calmer because he had not seen Bessy's battle scores.
Hey, did she just change her name?
The director originally wanted to cut to another scene. Who knew she would buy a renaming card in the professional arena? And arrogantly, under countless stares, she even changed her name to OST BM. What the hell? Was she still doing this on the spot? The commentator, who had witnessed countless surprising scenes, was also a little stunned. Who would explain to him what was going on with this new member of OST? The countless audience members were also silent. They had been shouting, "Sun God," but were stunned by this action as well. Someone said, "This player is interesting." Yes, she's a little arrogant. Toby's fans were not brainless. After the initial explosion, they all calmed down. Although they were disappointed, they still cheered on OST.
Show off.
Team WAT's coach watched the live broadcast and sneered disdainfully at the scene.
Wait till they fight with Otto.
It was not just WAT's coach who thought this way, but the millions of viewers watching the live broadcast also thought so. Without Toby, and facing off against the most powerful team besides OST, the fans gave up hope of winning. Anyone who watched the live broadcast knew that there would be gambling before the start of every game. They would bet on which side would win with money. The officials would then automatically settle the bets before the game was over, and the prizes would be given automatically after the victory had been decided. At the beginning of the game, the odds of OST against WAT had reached as high as 9.9 to 1. The OST was bet on by more than $10 million through the official live broadcast. In addition, more than $100 million was wagered on WAT. Almost everyone had chosen to believe that WAT would win without any hesitation. Only some of OST's die-hard fans still steadfastly bet on their side even though they knew they would lose. Everyone preemptively assumed that WAT would win almost as soon as the game opened, so the money on WAT's side was already full. The officials closed the bet. Some people did not have time to bet on WAT and immediately stamped their feet regretfully. The live broadcast was divided into screens, with a player broadcast on each side. The commentator glanced at Bessy's opening moves. His interest was piqued, and he continued,
"Could she be the second Chloe?"
They all knew that Chloe had lost in hand speed to Toby.
"But it's difficult to tell against Otto."
Another commentator also explained seriously,
"Otto is a talented player and is also invincible in the field. He's won more than he lost."
The game started and both sides entered the venue with their cards. As the #1 player in Germany, Otto's steady and explosive outbursts were worthy of his reputation, but he was not bothered even against Bessy and Wyatt. In the beginning, both sides tested each other. Bessy played behind Wyatt, only going along with what he was doing. When the opponent tried to raise the stakes, she would only check. The opponent had control of the game.
"What the fuck? Is this BM stupid? Why does she only check?
Can she not see?
How did OST let her play? Where is Randall? This is even weaker than folding. She's simply useless."
They started cursing her one by one on the comment page. OST had always been invincible in the game and was rarely cursed at by people right at the start of the game. The people simply lost it when they saw Henry lose a few rounds. If I knew this would happen, I would have bet on WAT instead of OST. Was Bessy acting? Of course not. Neither side knew what cards the other team had, and she had not played with her teammates before either. However, there was something very strange about her. She could play with almost every teammate cooperatively. This was the biggest reason why Samuel teamed up with her in the arena. It was the same at this time. After Henry began to waver, Bessy's strange playing finally stopped. "Henry," she said. "Roger that," he replied. Bessy made a big move and chose to call. The audience, not to mention Otto, who had been testing out OST, was surprised by her actions. Henry then followed up by increasing the bet. After Bessy's showy individual move, she went all in. "What the heck?" The commentator couldn't help but swear. "BM hopes to catch Otto bluffing? As everyone knows, Otto is very stable, and few people outwit him besides Sun God. What the heck? Otto has no choice but to go all in?" Before the commentator finished speaking, the game page showed that it was time for everyone to reveal their cards. Bessy revealed that she had 4 of a kind, which beat Otto's bad hand. What the hell? She still managed to escape without death? What kind of godly operation was this? Everyone there, as well as those watching the live broadcast, watched this scene passionately and couldn't help but swear with the commentator. What the fuck? The audience, who had been so mad before, exploded into a thunderous burst of chatter. It resonated through the stadium. Those who had chosen to place their money on OST before the game opening were dumbfounded. "I can get rich just by betting?" The odds of 9.9. They were indeed rich. WAT depended on Otto, but without him, WAT was gone. WAT's coach had originally sneered disdainfully when he saw Bessy, calling her a rash newbie. Less than 20 minutes after the start of the game, Team WAT was defeated. The director also seemed to be stunned. After the game, he suddenly adjusted the camera to point at Bessy. She still wore a mask and only revealed a pair of very good-looking eyes that were squinted slightly. Both Twitter and the auditorium exploded. OST's newcomer BM became famous. News of OST's win also exploded. Countless net scenes started discussing who this super fierce young lady was. Someone commented silently among them, I suggest you go see the leaderboard of the final district." There were many likes. Several comments are gathered below. "I'm back on my knees. My legs are weak." Many people didn't have a first district account and were extremely anxious until one of them sent a picture. The screenshot showed a picture of the first district's leaderboard. First district's big boss. No one dared to speak. Episode 158. Bessy is a master. Bessy took off her mask after getting off the stage. The commentator originally wanted Bessy to stay behind for an interview, but she didn't want to, so they pushed Henry up instead. She followed the coach backstage. She walked to the passageway and bumped into Michael and the others. Michael was looking down and deep in thought and raised his head slightly when he heard the sound of her coming down. Bessy put her mask in her pocket. "Let me explain." Stunned, the coach took a moment to realize that these were Bessy's friends from earlier in the lounge. "Bessy, you guys talk. I'll go back for the interview." The coach had been invited for the interview. He had planned to return for it after taking Bessy back to the lounge. But since Michael and the others were here, he didn't follow Bessy any further. Instead, he went back to Henry and the others who were being interviewed. WAT's coach was still inside his lounge, but the WAT players were nearby. Otto heard them talking and also glanced at Bessy. There wasn't a hint of disappointment in his eyes, and he seemed rather excited to have found a worthy competitor instead. "I hope I can play against you and Toby next time," he said. Bessy was speechless. Next time, she wouldn't be playing. After the coach and the players from Team WAT had left, Marvin's paralyzed face finally relaxed. He thought of Bessy's words. To explain how could she explain this? Samuel had felt lightheaded ever since Bessy loaded her account. Where was the Bessy whom he trusted, whom he believed only played with the auxiliary cards and didn't have particularly high accumulated points? Why did she suddenly become the beast from the first district who gave points to Michael? How was she such an exceptional player that she could beat Otto? When Samuel saw Bessy for the first time, he felt an inexplicable sense of trust in her, so he accepted her into the school doctor's office without even checking with Michael. He had been steadfast towards her. As overly anxious as Samuel always was, he never imagined Bessy would deceive him so badly. Samuel felt dizzy and had yet to come to his senses. Perhaps this was karma from gloating too hard over Robert's misfortune previously. However, Michael was smiling as he leaned to one side and nodded. His dark eyes were focused on her, and after a while, he nodded and said in amusement,
"Well, tell us."
"I started playing this game the moment it began, and I think my score was quite high, so someone invited me to play professionally," Bessy said. Marvin felt like Bessy spoke too lightly of it, as if any other human could also play professionally. The corner of his mouth curled up in a smile. Michael nodded and narrowed his eyes at her.
"Continue."
"I was already retired, but the former coach of OST didn't take out my name." Michael raised an eyebrow at her, his eyes light and misty. Bessy finally lowered her head and stopped struggling to give excuses. There were staff members everywhere after the game. Michael nodded, squeezed his hands, and it took a lot of effort to suppress himself. He glanced at her lightly and said,
"Go to the lounge first."
Inexplicably, Bessy felt like he was telling her to continue the conversation later. Both the host and the commentator were in the interview area with Henry.
"Godhaze, may I ask, where did you find this amazing team member?"
The host looked around and felt extremely disappointed that Bessy wasn't there. He wasn't the only one disappointed. The Netzines who had stayed for the live broadcast of the interview were also extremely bummed. Everyone had thought that Team OST would surely lose this time without Toby. After all, there were two newcomers. One had never played in the official arena, and the other wasn't even a trainee. The Netzines' odds of 9.9 to 1 had been totally serious. In the end, Bessy's breakout took Otto by storm. In all fairness, Otto didn't go easy on her, even if she was a newcomer. Thus, her skill in such a situation was enough to show Bessy's control over her cards and her ability to calculate her moves. Her breakout was obvious. Anyone who could play poker tournament knew that even if Toby got Otto in a situation like that, he might not be able to retreat safely. Otto's stability and strength were well known. No matter which game it was, he would rise to his maximum potential. On several occasions, the victory between Toby and Otto had only been determined by a thin line. Nobody would think that Otto didn't perform well or had gone easy on this opponent. Someone once lamented that if Otto had debuted a few years earlier or later than Toby, things would have been different. With his ability, he was also considered a person destined to have his era. But now, not only was there Toby in OST, but there was also this newcomer, BM. Team OST was already undefeated in poker tournament, so who would compete with them now? It wasn't only the host and the commentator who wanted to know who this BM was. Many Netzines in front of the screen were burning with curiosity as well.
"Newcomer?"
Henry shook his head and laughed.
"She's not a newcomer. She joined the team at the same time as us, but something happened, so she didn't continue. Something happened to Sun God today, so she had no choice but to come forward. In the future, there will be few opportunities like this, so of course, I would also like to thank Sun God."
Toby, who was watching the live broadcast in Daniel's laboratory, was speechless. He glanced over at his Twitter. A second ago, his fans had still been crying and asking him where he was, what he was doing, and if he was okay. But the next second, his Twitter was spammed with,
"Thank you, Sun God.
Sun God, you can disappear a few more times in the future," and
"Could you please force her to play more often?"
Although this was what Toby wanted to see as well, it was still a little unbearable at this time, and he was rendered speechless. Were these his beloved fans? Of course, the ones who gained the most from this incident were those who had placed their money on the 9.9 odds before the game. Those who had placed all their net worth on Team WAT changed their tune drastically. They regretted it very much. Why did they not believe in Team OST's ability? The Netzines had yet to calm down even after the interview with Team OST. People posted questions on Team OST's official website, on Henry's Twitter and Toby's Twitter.
What was the young girl's Twitter?
After a long while, someone emerged and answered them.
Don't you all remember that Sun God mentioned @BM a month ago?
The coach and the others came back to the lounge. Samuel was still sitting in a daze in front of Toby's computer, thinking about life. Marvin was slightly better off.
But you said your rank wasn't enough to play with me.
Samuel stared at Bessy. Bessy didn't feel guilty at all. I have 20 stars at the Supreme level, so only a 1 star on the Supreme level can play as a duo with me. If I play as a duo with you, I will have to fall to the Guru level. I'm indeed not at the same rank, so I didn't lie to you. Samuel was speechless and felt like his heart had been slashed again.
Did you already know that Michael was your friend in the game?
Samuel wasn't quite clear on anything and suddenly remembered the moment when Bessy had paused after first logging into Michael's account. Bessy coughed, and her self-righteous attitude wavered. In the end, she couldn't bear it and promised to send Samuel the same thing that she sent Michael. With a sad face, Samuel eventually nodded and expressed his generosity in forgiving her. Michael raised an eyebrow at him, but didn't say anything. Henry and the others opened the door and came in at this moment. Where's Randall? Bessy stood up from the chair and narrowed her eyes slightly. The coach had already had his suspicions since before the game, but he had been focused on the game and had not said anything to Randall. Now that Bessy mentioned it, he nodded slightly.
He's in the other lounge.
Bessy nodded and smiled, but her eyes were cold. She lifted her chin towards the coach and said, "Let's go." Henry made a phone call to Toby and was relieved to hear that he was okay now. After hearing Bessy's conversation with the coach, he pursed his lips with dark eyes and a solemn expression.
Let's go find him.
The coach didn't hear this, but he had heard what Michael said before. If not for God Miller's friend, Toby would have been taken to the hospital, and his left hand might have continued to suffer from some repercussions. For an esports player, that was enough to destroy all his attack skills. Inside OST's lounge, Randall didn't play or go to the auditorium. He just sat in front of the broadcast screen in the lounge to watch the game. After seeing the coach behave so calmly, he thought that the drug didn't affect Toby. It wasn't until Bessy and the others came on stage that he realized that Toby had indeed been drugged. Randall almost laughed at the time. He didn't know Bessy, but he knew Wyatt and knew that he alone wasn't an opponent of Otto at all. In his mind, he believed that OST would lose within half an hour. Unexpectedly, the game didn't go on for half an hour, because within 20 minutes, Bessy had ended the battle. She had played more proficiently than Toby. Randall felt like his sight had dimmed. He listened to Henry's post-match interview and picked up his phone to scroll through Twitter. Following the net scenes, he found Toby's Twitter post almost effortlessly. Her hand speed was faster than Toby's. Toby wanted to be on the same stage. She was once a member of OST. She was a great god that was first in the first district. Everything pointed in the same direction. Randall wasn't in that group of net zines. He was in the industry and naturally knew much more than ordinary net zines. Episode 159. Let's Meet. Before Randall could conclude, the door was pushed open. The coach, Bessy, and the others all came in. The rest of the OST members and staff all stood up and swarmed over.
Coach, we won!
Although they were calling for the coach, their eyes were focused on Bessy. In each of their groups, screenshots of Bessy's account in the first district had already been circulated. Even Team OST members, apart from a few old players, had rarely seen an account from the first district, even though they had heard of the legend. They had also seen Henry's interview. They knew that this was an old member of the previous OST. Who were the old members? Although outsiders were unaware, OST insiders were very clear. They had already suppressed their fanatical feelings towards Bessy. Bessy pulled up the hood from her black sweater and partially covered her forehead. She glanced around the lounge and chuckled. I'm looking for Randall. Everyone else can leave. The coach stood a few steps behind her, and when he saw how stunned the other people were, he said,
Leave now.
Bam. Everyone finally relaxed and left.
What the hell? Just now, was that her?
Someone murmured as they went. I think so, someone else said slowly. Inside, Randall put away his phone and stood up from his gaming chair. He glanced past everyone and finally stared at Bessy. For some reason, he suddenly felt uneasy.
"Coach,"
he called. The coach only glanced at him coldly. "Tell me." Bessy didn't sit down and just leaned on the armrest of the gaming chair by the door. She turned to stare directly at Randall and raised an eyebrow. "Why did you drug Toby?" The coach and Henry stood beside Bessy. Randall wasn't a fool and had sensed the coach's attitude as well. He could feel that the coach was especially polite to her, even more so than he was to Toby. Randall's heart sank and he pursed his lips.
"I don't know what you are talking about."
"The dormitory is equipped with surveillance, and Toby's things will be taken for investigation. We will find out who it was as soon as we check the fingerprints." Bessy leaned back and clenched her fists. "Toby's hands are damaged and he can no longer play in the future. Just compensating him for that alone will be enough to crush you." The coach had thought that though Toby had been harmed by someone, he would be fine after a while. But after hearing this, he shouted,
"Bessy, Toby's hand?"
Without hesitating, Henry lowered his eyebrows, walked over to Randall, and punched him hard in the face. When he lowered his eyebrows like that, his light and breezy expression from the interview was gone. The bottoms of his eyes were blood red, and even his normally messy blonde hair seemed especially cold. "Why did you harm Sun God and OST?" It had not been easy to maintain OST up until this point. When Bessy left back then, he and Toby persisted. Henry's image on the team was usually carefree. It was different from the coach or Toby's wise image, so this was the first time Randall had seen his attitude change. Randall froze for a moment and took a step back, his heart beating wildly and sweat rolling down his spine. Could Toby's hand be...
"No, that's impossible. They told me it was only to prevent Toby from playing tonight. How could he not be able to play in the future?"
Hearing this, Bessy nodded and stood up from her chair. She looked at the coach and said, "You can handle the rest. The World Poker Tour would handle this matter well." As for Randall, even if World Poker Tour didn't intervene, no future esports team would accept him with his character. He had no future left. The coach nodded but felt cold sweat on his back. After Bessy left, he turned to Henry.
"Toby, I'm not clear about the situation, but he has been sent over to God Miller's friend."
Henry glared fiercely at Randall. The coach called the World Poker Tour's officials to deal with both Toby and Randall. They especially had to deal with Toby. According to Henry, if he couldn't even be saved by the hospital, only the World Poker Tour could find a solution. The coach called someone and they picked up quickly. It was his assistant's voice on the other end.
"Were there complications with his hand?"
Hearing this, the assistant froze for a long time before replying tensely.
"Is he okay? Where is he now? I will contact a specialist immediately."
The coach told the assistant that Toby was with Bessy. The assistant had already made contact with a few specialists and immediately put down his phone after hearing the coach's words. Henry didn't hear much of the conversation.
"How is it?"
he asked anxiously after seeing the coach hang up with a strange expression. The coach put the phone back.
"They said, if he's with Bessy then, it's okay, even if he's broken his hand."
Henry was speechless. The two eventually video called Toby out of worry about his situation. Toby was lying on the chair of Daniel's laboratory at this time and smiled when he received the video call from Henry.
"Your game this evening was great."
Bessy was exceptionally impressive. All night, Twitter's hot searches were about Bessy.
"Yeah, how are you doing now?"
Henry glanced at the video and first thought that Bessy's friend's house was an ordinary place. But then he realized that there were a bunch of precision instruments he had never seen before in the background. Henry was taken aback. How was this a friend's house? This was a laboratory. At the same time, Bessy and the others arrived at Daniel's house. Bessy went directly to the laboratory on the 3rd floor. Toby was still half lying on the patient's chair. He supported himself with the chair and stood up immediately when he saw Bessy.
"God Miller,"
he called weakly. Bessy glanced at him sideways, picked up a list next to him, and looked at a bunch of medical terms on the paper. Unable to understand it, she frowned delicately and threw it to Michael behind her, annoyed. Michael took a look at it and leaned back slightly. Daniel was still busy with the test tube.
"No need to look at it. Your friend is fine. I will give him medicine later."
Daniel put the test tube on the shelf. Then he picked up the microscope and observed the petri dish. Hearing this, Bessy's mind was eased, and she thought it was probably nothing much to worry about. It was just that Michael's words in the lounge had been a little scary. Michael finished reading it and threw the list on the table. He seemed to know what Bessy was thinking, for he raised an eyebrow slightly and said, in dissatisfaction at her suspicion,
"I didn't intend to scare you on purpose."
Toby would continue staying with Daniel. He really might not be able to play anymore if he was treated by someone else. Bessy touched her nose with one hand, lowered her head and stopped talking. Someone was video calling the laboratory's computer again. Daniel had picked up the microscope and was about to go to another instrument, but he turned back to answer the video call. Robert was originally sitting next to Toby, coldly scrolling through his Twitter while glancing over occasionally. Seeing this, he stood up immediately and said,
"Daniel, don't move. Let me do it."
He took the microscope from Daniel and brought it to the other instrument. Daniel took off his medical gloves and pressed the answer button.
"Daniel, are you going to release your report tomorrow?"
The video showed an old man from the World Health Organization. He held a report in his hands and pushed the glasses up the bridge of his nose.
"I will release it quickly, so you won't ask me for another study this month."
Daniel narrowed his slightly sinister eyes.
The old man exploded. "You bad student."
Michael saw that Bessy wasn't looking at him, so he also walked over slowly and said in a light tone,
"Hey, don't sign my name on it. Beloved student, you're still here?"
The old man immediately changed to an affable tone, and his fierce expression melted away.
"Are you not signing your name again this time?"
Michael had done a lot of research with people in the organization, but, of course, he usually just spoke about it casually. There would naturally be people trying to snatch the experiment from him. In the first batch of students, more than half of the graduate students from his alma mater had received their inspiration from Michael, but he never once signed his name. Michael shrugged casually before reaching out to take the report from Daniel and looking down at it. The old man in the video found a pen and crossed out Michael's name. Then, he suddenly remembered something.
"Bad student, did you talk to your big sponsor about the subsidy? Let me tell you, our organization needs more money to complete more studies."
He looked up at Daniel and began to pour out his sufferings. After settling the time of the report's release, Daniel had turned around to prepare medicine for Toby. After hearing this, he turned sideways and frowned.
"I don't know. Should I try contacting him tonight?"
The diamond dealer's appearance was unpredictable, so although the two of them were friends, Daniel might not always be able to find him. Other than Matthew, Daniel rarely saw the other two sponsors who supported him. Michael was reaching for a glass of water from Alfred's tray to take a sip. When he heard this, he raised an eyebrow calmly. Daniel prepared Toby's medicine and had him take it immediately.
"Alfred, water."
Daniel snapped his fingers. Alfred brought another glass of water over. Toby wasn't ignorant and had seen much of the world, but when he stepped into Daniel's house, every second was a shock to him. Swallowing the medicine with water, Toby's eyes fell on Alfred and he asked,
"Where did you buy this robot?"
He also wanted to buy one. Robert also wanted to ask Daniel about Alfred. He was prepared to go back to Evanston and build a fully automatic lazy haul at home. Hearing this, he couldn't help but look up and lean forward. Daniel's white sleeves were rolled up as he inspected Toby seriously. Hearing his question, he said vaguely,
"You cannot buy it. It was customized."
On the other hand, Bessy put down her cup and said lightly, "You guys talk. I will go back to sleep." It was late at night when Bessy finished her shower. While drying her hair, she took out her computer from her bag and looked at the time. It was already 11 o'clock. She had been a little uneasy recently. Although she had already called Bertha in the morning, she still wanted to make a video call to confirm her condition. But looking at the time, she gave up. She picked up her phone and saw that Henry had sent her the OST's official website. Bessy clicked on the link. She automatically followed the official website, and it seemed to send out a notification to her circle of friends. Before she could take a look at it, someone knocked on the door 3 times. It was a very polite and gentlemanly knock. Bessy's hair was half dried, and Daniel's house had a constant temperature of 75 degrees all year round, so she threw her towel casually to the side and opened the door. It was Michael. He leaned halfway on the doorframe, deep in thought. He looked up when he heard the door opening and stared at Bessy with bright, peach blossom eyes. He seemed to smile slightly and looked extremely gentle under the soft lights. Bessy coughed and was silent.
Hey.
Michael smiled motionlessly and tilted his head while smirking casually.
I'm here to listen to your explanation, Godmiller.
Bessy was speechless. After a while, she turned sideways. Come in.
You recognized me the first time you logged into my account, right?
Michael sat on the sofa with his hands to his sides and seemed to ask casually. Bessy poured a glass of water for herself and Michael before lowering her head even further and giving up completely. Yeah. She originally thought that after asking these questions, Michael would continue to ask her about 3 years ago, so she squeezed her cup and thought of some countermeasures. Unexpectedly, Michael went silent after asking this. He finished his glass of water and stood up to leave. A little stunned, Bessy put down her cup as well and paused before standing up. Michael opened the door, but before he stepped out, he turned around and reached out to give Bessy a small hug. Under the dim lights, Michael's voice was low and slow and even a little husky. He almost gritted his teeth and said, with inexplicable emotions,
I waited 3 days for you.
Boom. He closed the door. Bessy stood frozen in shock. After a long while, she looked up, slowly walked towards the sofa and sat back down. Her cell phone lit up on the table. Bessy ignored it. It lit up again. Bessy reached out and saw that it was from Noah Hyper. The first message was a screenshot of her circle of friends, showing that she had shared OST's official website. Below it was a message with the name of the street where she was currently in Devil City. Noah Hyper sent another message.
Nico, I'm also in Devil City. Can we meet?
Episode 160. The Master Arranger, Nico. Bessy had never sent anything to her circle of friends on Twitter. She never noticed that Twitter would alert her circle of friends if they were nearby. There were only 3 very standard official news pieces on her Twitter Moments, shared with her circle of friends. Noah Hyper still had not finished filming his music video after 2 days. Besides recording songs, he also stayed up late to write lyrics. He had received Bessy's Twitter notification just when he had gotten tired of writing lyrics, so he had picked up his phone to flip through the message on Bessy's profile. The address shown below was somewhere in Devil City, so Noah took note of the street and checked the location on his cell phone map. That part of the city was separated by a river, but it wasn't too far away. He then sent 2 Twitter messages to her.
Noah, there will be one last shoot tomorrow morning.
Noah's manager knocked on the door and came in to see him lying down on the table. He wasn't sleeping and didn't look like he intended to sleep. He was holding his phone that he rarely picked up, with eyebrows lowered and a cold face. At this time, he was staring at his phone with a serious expression. Noah did music and knew how to play almost all kinds of instruments. His fingers were extremely slender and smooth, and his joints were distinct. The way he was holding his phone, it seemed like he was waiting for a reply. The manager was stunned by Noah's actions, and the words, "You should sleep earlier," were swallowed back into his throat. Noah didn't have social connections in the entertainment industry, nor did he make any efforts to do so. Although he had a Twitter account, his manager took care of it for him and only posted about his advertisements or news of his album. The manager didn't help him post on Twitter to make social connections either. Noah had spent a few years working to finally stand firm in this circle, and now there was no need to deliberately set up connections with people just to help him stabilize his popularity. He was a thorough music maniac. In his eyes, outside of music, there was still only more music. It was rare to see him looking at his phone with such an expression. The manager was stunned for a moment before carefully probing.
Noah, what are you doing?
Could he be chatting with a girl? If that were true, Twitter would explode.
Nico is also in Devil City.
Noah Hyper squinted slightly, reached over, and flipped the phone to see that the other person still had not replied. The manager had thought it was a girl. Hearing Noah Hyper, he froze for a long time before reconfirming with him.
Who?
Nico Rivera, my arranger. Noah Hyper looked up at the manager. Everyone in the entertainment circle knew that behind the genius singer Noah Hyper was a godly arranger. Nico Rivera. His contributions to Noah's current status in the entertainment circle could not go unnoticed. Noah's first dark rock music that became popular on the internet was composed by Nico. Without Nico, Noah Hyber would not be where he is today. However, Nico was a little mysterious. The netizens couldn't pull a single piece of information about him, and even Noah himself wasn't clear. Although Nico wasn't someone in the entertainment industry and had never shown his face before, he was still famous as the most mysterious person in the circle. Some people even suspected that Nico was Noah's wealthy investor. Otherwise, why was Noah so popular without any advertisements? And why did nobody in the entertainment industry dare to offend him? Countless fans and musicians were curious about his true face. Some people even paid a large sum of money to Noah Hyber's staff to obtain Nico's contact information. After all, as long as they could contact Nico, they could obtain his arrangements and compositions. His style was well known, and his music had always been popular. The staff members had indeed been moved by the large sum of money, but unfortunately, where would they obtain information about Nico? If Nico himself was exposed today, he would become as popular as Noah Hyber. It would be gossip as good as the news of Selena Lawrence's relationship. Noah's manager's understanding of Nico was still at a mystery level, and Nico contacted Noah very rarely at fixed times. He didn't send anything but compositions. It had only been half a month since the last composition that Nico had sent to Noah. Therefore, the manager didn't think that Noah would be waiting for news from Nico. The manager gasped.
The great arranger is here as well? Yeah.
Noah looked at his phone, but there was still no reply. Squinting, he said,
I have asked him to meet me face to face, but he hasn't replied to me yet.
The manager's mouth twitched at his words.
Noah, how could the great arranger possibly meet you?
Last time, when Nico asked Noah for a full set of albums, they even sent them via the World Poker Tour Corporation. It had been sent to the World Poker Tour's reception desk. Thus, no private information could be revealed at all. Noah stared at the Twitter page reluctantly, waiting for Nico to reply to him. However, no reply came, even after waiting for half an hour. At the same time, in Daniel's manor, Michael had gone back to his room. He was in the second room and Bessy was in the third. After returning from Bessy's room, he didn't go to sleep. He reached out and opened the window, leaning against it. The temperature in Devil City in December didn't drop below 32 degrees, but the wind before 12 o'clock was still cold. It just happened to extinguish the heat of his heart. Michael sat down while leaning against the window without turning on the lights. He pinched a cigarette between his fingers. It was lit, and the light flickered slightly, illuminating a face that was elegant and refined, but his expression was unclear. After a long while, when it was almost 12 o'clock, he snuffed the cigarette and closed the window. He walked over to the switch and turned on the lights. The incandescent lamp turned on, and the whole room was illuminated in white. Michael wasn't used to the light and squinted slightly. Then he walked to the table and turned on the computer that came with the room. Daniel's computers were almost all the same shade of black. It booted up quickly and didn't lag no matter how many web pages were opened for playing games, so Samuel had said more than once that he wanted to take the computer home with him. Once the computer was turned on, Michael directly logged onto an account. Soon, the computer screen turned black and was connected. It was quickly connected to a video camera. On the other side of the video was a large and round black table. Around the round table were several people in black suits.
Boss.
A man near the age of 30 stood at the front and immediately stepped back to one side when he saw the screen brighten. Michael nodded and glanced at the screen.
Where's Alexander? He went to sort the transaction database at the headquarters.
A 30-year-old man named Christopher Clark, with blue eyes and slightly curly brown hair, paused and then asked,
Is your injury all right?
Michael leaned back, his eyes dark and misty as he chuckled.
Is someone agitated? Don't worry. Oh yes, transfer a sum of money to the old man's account.
Christopher was very familiar with commands. He knew without asking who the old man was. He nodded.
Is it the same number as before?
Michael nodded casually.
By the way, Marvin asked me about Alexander the other day.
As he said this, Christopher glanced carefully at Michael.
Boss, have you not told Marvin yet? No, do not tell him.
Michael shook his head. He said a few more words before reaching out to turn off the video call. At the other end of the video call, Christopher finished talking to Michael and went out the door. He took a few steps outside and ordered someone to transfer a sum of money to the medical organization. Then he went to find Alexander. His phone rang again. Looking down, he saw that Marvin was still frantically sending news of Bessy to their group. Christopher thought Marvin was simply crazy and couldn't help but shake his head. People in Evanston thought that Marvin was one of Michael's most trusted men, which is why he brought Marvin along everywhere. Even Marvin seemed to think so. But in fact, their boss just couldn't stand Marvin's level of intelligence or his foolishness, so he had not sent him out to do other things. Marvin also didn't realize that their boss never seemed to let him do anything real. Miserable. He was miserable. On the third floor of Daniel's manor, Robert was drowsy and put his hand on his chin, nodding off like a chicken pecking on rice. When he raised his head, Daniel was still busying himself in front of an experimental instrument. Alfred had also found a place to recharge himself, so Robert went downstairs to get 2 glasses of water.
Daniel, why are you still not sleeping?
Robert handed a glass of water to Daniel and yawned. Daniel took it and drank from it.
The World Health Organization will issue a statement tomorrow morning. I need to try the experiment again quickly.
Results sent out from the organization had been much like Daniel expected. He would repeat it one more time before tomorrow morning for the results to be available.
Are you not tired?
Robert was sleepy, and his eyes were wet from yawning continuously. Daniel, who had always been at the forefront of medicine, was excited when he thought of the regenerated tissue he had researched. So how could he possibly be sleepy?
I'm not tired. I still have some time.
Daniel reached out to roll up the sleeves of his white shirt. Because he rarely went out in the sun, his arms were very white. The computer in the laboratory lit up again. Daniel turned around and picked it up. When he saw the face in the video, he put a cigarette in his mouth and vaguely opened his mouth.
Teacher, why are you looking for me now?
Could something have happened to the medical results for tomorrow? The old man gave Daniel a rare smile and said,
Daniel, you're so fast. Just 2 hours after I told you, your diamond dealer sent the money. Tell him for me that if he has any problem in the future, our organization will be on call.
Although the World Health Organization was smaller, they were still part of the World Medical Federation. Many people cherished their lives and nobody wanted to have a bad relationship with the organization. But not many people could be in a good relationship with them. Daniel's fingers rested on the table and squinted.
Teacher, what are you talking about? The sponsor who transferred the money.
The old man was still smiling happily. He was also busy planning for the press conference tomorrow, so he hung up after saying a few more words. After he hung up, Daniel bit his cigarette, and his delicate face showed confusion. Robert knew the rumors of the 3 sponsors behind Daniel, and so he wasn't confused. He raised an eyebrow and couldn't help but ask,
What's wrong with you? Oh,
Daniel reacted and shook his head.
I was thinking.
He had been in the laboratory the whole day, and he had not contacted the diamond dealer at all. What did the old man just say?